Well, firstly, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us in the first day of official conference. I know many of you were probably out last night. Hopefully not. So my name is Tarik. I used to be a councillor in Tower Hamlets, and I'm a board member of the SME as well. So we're going to speak about trade with Turkey and how we can expand and how we can invest more and sort of buy more from Turkey as well. I'll introduce our two guest speakers first, or they can introduce themselves.
Yeah. So good morning, everyone, and really nice to be here in this event. So I'm Abdul. I'm a former councillor in Camden for the past 16 years, and I'm also the vice chair for SME for Labour.
Hi, I'm Naomi Smith. I am the chief executive of a group called Best for Britain. We campaign to fix the problems Britain faces after Brexit, and we also act as secretariat to something called the UK Trade and Business Commission, which is a cross-party, cross-industry grouping that takes evidence from experts, lots and lots of SMEs who are experts in trade, as well as academics, trade experts, trade bodies, trade unions, to, am I not being quite loud enough? Yeah. To make recommendations to government and future government about how to improve trade deals, predominantly with Europe, but also to make sure that there's sufficient scrutiny of the trade deals that the government is signing as we go around the world, signing new ones. So I know a fair bit about trade and what would make a better trading environment for the UK. And it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you, Abdul and Naomi. So the context of this is Turkey and the UK have committed to negotiating a new trade deal after Brexit, and the consultation is expected to happen very soon with loads of negotiations. So we are. It's a good time to actually talk about this because the trade negotiations are happening as we speak. And finally, sort of Britain's trade with Turkey is worth around £23.5 billion annually. So it's very sort of it's one of the top 20 trade deals Britain has. So that's fine. Thank you. What we'll start off is with both our guests giving a sort of having a couple of minutes setting out the context, and then we'll go into some questions. If that's okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Abdul?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chair. So I think I'm going to set it in three contexts. The first is the sort of trade and bilateral relationship with Turkey. The second one is sort of investment and defence cooperation. And third one is sort of national security. So I'll try giving an overview. As Tarik correctly says, so if you look at the bilateral trade between Turkey and Britain, it's approximately about 23.8 billion. That's sort of ending quarter one of 2023. So in terms of trade, it is Turkey is seen as quite a strategic partner for the UK. In terms of between total exports between Turkey UK exports to Turkey is around about 9.1 billion, whereas exports from UK exports from Turkey is about 14 billion. There's quite a bit of a deficit. So Turkey, it's UK, it's the fourth largest trading partner, sort of ending quarter one of 2023. And just to give you sort of how this bilateral trade has developed over the years. So if you look at 2013, the total value of trade between Turkey and UK was about 13.1 billion, whereas now in 2022 that is over 23.8 billion. So you can see the increment over the years, and I think for us maintaining that trade relationship is really important. Obviously, if you look at by sector, I think we Turkey produces more goods for us, whereas we deliver services. So post Brexit, I think Britain has an opportunity, as Tarik said, that in July there was an agreement between, in principle, free trade deal to be negotiated, and I think we can export a lot of our services. In terms of investment and defence, again, that is really, really important, because as UK tries to seek to diversify its projects and priorities post-Brexit. So in July, we've agreed in principle to negotiate. If you look at in terms of the investment, Britain has agreed 680 million loans granted for Turkey to build high-speed electric railway. It is a bit of a far cry from what the government's done now. They've agreed to scrap between Birmingham and Manchester. But again, you can see the potential for Britain to help. And also on defence cooperation, obviously our relations, bilateral relations, is very deep, and we want to make sure that we're able to build on it. So, for example, the training capacity efforts, joint military exercise, there are really good sign for us. And also, I think, look, Turkey is a NATO member, has the second largest military after US. So it's really important at the time of when we thought that we've gone past the kind of carnage that we've seen in World War I and World War II, and NATO was created to create peace. And what's happening in Ukraine and Russia's invaded, the role of NATO is so important. So Turkey strategically is an important partner for us because of a NATO partner being between gateway between Asia and Europe, and having second largest military after US. There are some tensions between some elements of Turkey's relationship. So, for example, Turkey decided to purchase Russians made S-40 missiles, which created a bit of a tension because Turkey is part of NATO, and there are some natural concerns. The other one that I want to say was just on the national security. Again, I think if you look at migrations, I think Turkey has played a very important role hosting the largest refugee populations in the world, and dealing with migrations, particularly people who are trying to smuggle illegal migrants and stopping that beyond our borders. It is in our national interest, and so there are lots of good opportunities for us to work. But I think we have to see Turkey in the context of post Brexit, post sort of Russian and Ukraine invasion, and I think we could build that bilateral relationship. We can strengthen it, and given the fact that we've got an opportunity of agreeing a free trade deal with Turkey, I think we should seize that opportunity.
Great, thank you for the introduction. Excellent, thank you. So to my left, Naomi.
Hi. So yeah, I mean, look, just going on from those comments, trade is a force for good and can be and should be. And if we think about the EU and why it was set up in the aftermath of terrible world wars, a founding tenet of it was that economic ties can help prevent conflict. And I would go as far as arguing that the EU is the greatest peace project in human history, ending centuries of bloodshed for a very long time on the continent of Europe. And I am personally very, very sad that the UK is no longer a member of the EU. I think that you can strengthen democratic ties through strengthening economic ties. And contrary to what Rishi Sunak would have had you believe this week in his speech, Brexit has not saved British businesses £1 billion from cutting Brussels red tape. It really is quite the opposite, and SME for Labour know this because SMEs across the UK are really struggling with the amount of red tape that Brexit and trade friction at our border with our largest trading partner has caused, and it's hurting consumers as much as it's hurting businesses, the costs of course being passed on. And the London School of Economics estimates that Brexit has increased the average annual food bill by over £250. Now of course our food bills have gone up by even more than that because of inflation, because of supply chain issues, not least caused by some of the difficulty with Ukraine and getting wheat out of the country there. But yeah, there are some signs of hope. One of the things that Turkey is involved with, of course, is the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention. It's called PEM for short, and that's what I'll use from now on to describe it. And it's really an example of how the EU can be creative and flexible in agreeing different arrangements with different countries. And Turkey is benefiting from that. And I would argue that Britain should seek to join PEM and reach a similar arrangement with the EU, and therefore by definition with all of the other PEM countries, Turkey included, as a way of reducing some of this administrative burden for British businesses and therefore easing some cost pressures for British consumers. That was a recommendation that we put forward in our UK Trade and Business Commission report earlier this year. We have a stall in the exhibition, in the main exhibition area, where you can pick up copies of that. There are actually 114 recommendations for government on improving trade, and joining PEM is just one of them. And I think regardless of our views on any one particular administration's record, whether it is defence, military, treatment of its people, of refugees or whatever, it's undeniable that Britain's ability to make its voice heard on any of those issues is diminished by not having a seat at the table, whether that is within the European Union or even within PEM. Because when you are part of a bigger bloc, you have far more leverage with your trading partners or the negotiations that you're doing with other countries. You can use your combined strength to get concessions from them on the things that matter to you in your liberal democracy, even if you're signing a trade deal with one that you may have concerns about. So we were once a leading voice very much within Europe, of course. We helped to craft and implement diplomatic and economic policy in the world's largest single market, and now we're sort of shouting from the outside about it. That isn't to say that we can't have influence, and I think we still do have some. For example, we've shown leadership, obviously, within Europe on the military side following the invasion of Ukraine. It's just not quite as strong as it once was. So trade can be a force for good. It should be a force for good. And I would hope that when we enter formal negotiations with Turkey over signing our new free trade agreement. We do have one at the moment with them, but it's a rollover from the existing one that we had as part of our membership with the EU, that we will use that opportunity to not only reduce trade friction and trade barriers and benefit from shared prosperity between both economies, but that we can use it as part of a wider discussion about how we want our economies to be behaving in the world at large.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you both. So before we open it up to questions, I've got a couple of questions to our guests. So what would a good trade deal with UK and Turkey look like, Abdul?
So I think this is really a good opportunity for us as we have left Brexit. We have to try negotiating the best possible deal for us. And if you look at the figures are very encouraging. Current sort of the deal between trade bilateral relations about 23 billion over the last 5 years. That has increased quite significantly. And I think, if you look at sort of Turkey's goods over the sort of last quarter, that has increased by 41%. So Turkey's exporting quite a lot of stuff to Britain, and I think we need to sort of work on this. And if you look at the inward investment, it is Turkey's inward investment is increasing. So especially now, that fact that we're not in Europe, I think we need to rely on other countries to invest in the UK, and goods. And just to give an example, so you look at during the pandemic, we had to rely on China for our PPI essential goods. Turkey has a real young population. It is within the European nations, within the European border. So strategically, we for whatever reasons, we never diversified our economy. So if you look at Germany, US, our economy is based on, more than over 80% based on the service sector, and we just need to readjust that, and maybe using the trade deals as a way of resetting some of those deficit, because we don't want to be in a position where during the pandemic we had to almost having to beg other nations to give us essential necessity for our NHS. But that is an example. So Turkey, part of that trade deal, I think there may be other stuff, other services that we can really try negotiating. But I think this is a good opportunity, and I very much hope that this government doesn't take things for granted. They may be in their final lap, maybe last year to go, but I very much hope that they take the trade deal very seriously, and needs to be thought out properly, and making sure that it serves the interest of UK.
Great, thank you. Naomi, what would a good trade deal between Turkey and the UK, Britain, look like?
Well, any good trade deal should really start with the trade negotiators making sure they have British industry represented. One of the reasons we've got such an appallingly terrible deal with the EU at the moment that Boris Johnson negotiated with David Frost, and they have, certainly David Frost has talked down that very deal he negotiated since, and in an admission that it is no good. One of the reasons why that is so bad is because there was almost no input from British business allowed into that process. This was done by mandarins in an appalling way. Any good trade deal, and remember, UK was part of the EU for 40 years, so it didn't really do trade deals for a very long time. It didn't have a huge number of experienced trade negotiators like other countries do. So when Johnson was in the process of negotiating it in 2020, we worked with some trade experts from Australia who, of course, have been signing free trade agreements with countries around the world for a very long time. And we asked them, how's it done? And they said, well, what Johnson should be doing, and quite clearly isn't, is having your major industries represented on this telephone and the partner that you're negotiating with on the other phone, and you speak to industry and you say, look, they're offering this % on tariffs, can you live with that? No, you can't, but you could if it was 0.5% different. Okay, could you do 0.5% different? And that is how it's meant to work. It is not meant to work by freezing out the people for whom implementation of that trade agreement is going to hit the hardest. So for sure the first thing that needs to happen is that, and at the moment it's still not happening. One of the other recommendations that we've made as part of our work is to establish an independent Board of Trade, because at the moment, if you look at the government's website, the Board of Trade, it's just a talking shop. They are not independent of government. Kemi Badenoch runs it, but they don't meet particularly often, and the people that sit on it are advisors to it, they're not members. And other countries like Sweden have a very robust independent Board of Trade. And so our recommendation is that the UK should really have an OBR for trade. This would allow it to undertake independent impact assessments, do forecasting on a Turkey trade deal, for instance, what it might look like, which sectors might be impacted the most, which may seek to have most advantage, which may actually suffer from it. So for instance, the New Zealand and Australia trade deals that we have signed as the UK over the last couple of years have actually been to the detriment of British agriculture. So our government is actively going around the world without consulting British industry and signing deals that hurt certain sectors of British industry, and certainly the net impact of many of those deals can end up being negative for the UK economy as a whole. So in speaking about it at that meta level rather than distinctly with Turkey, it's got to begin with far better consultation and a rigorous independent assessment before we sign things. And once business has had its say, I think Parliament should have its say. I think it is outrageous that there is now no longer any real parliamentary scrutiny of any of our trade deals within UK democracy. And again, that's something that we would push for. It is also worth remembering that most of our trade with Turkey at the moment is in the form of goods. And that's partly because as part of Turkey's much closer relationship with the EU than the UK's, it is a member of a customs union with Europe, that limits Turkey on what it is able to negotiate with third parties around certain sectors, including services, including agriculture, that they can only sign deals with the UK that are on the same terms of benefit as the UK-EU deal. So I'm sorry to sound like a boring EU bore that keeps coming back to that, but fundamentally, the best possible deal the UK could have with Turkey would be through membership of the EU. Now that's not going to happen anytime soon. So then the next best thing we can do is engage business, engage Parliament, and scrutinise what the government is proposing and offering and getting from Turkey to make sure that it is genuinely mutually beneficial for both economies, because the ones we've been signing since Brexit have very much been to the benefit of the other country and not the UK.
Great. Thank you, Naomi.